Welcome to the new JFK show number 270. We're going to be using the JFK blog, which is Larry is in control of. So his Spanish is a lot better than mine. So we're going to turn it over to Larry after Jim gives us a few words.
Yeah.
Well, it's just terrific to have the gang back here. I was doing the course on critical thinking and conspiracy theories for 15 weeks. So happily, that's now come to a conclusion. It conflicted with the time we're doing these shows, and we're so glad to have Larry, Gary, and me back in the saddle again. Larry, I've made you the host. Take it over, my friend.
Thank you, Jim. A lot of things going on, of course, as we continue to plow through records and new information coming out, and we've got a special show tonight because we're going to subdivide it here. The first part of the show is going to be on something that would have happened in Cuba and Havana, and which would have changed history altogether regarding Fidel Castro. And the other portion at the end, we're going to talk about Lee Oswald's actual passport, the one that he took in New Orleans in June of 1963, the summer where Orestes Peña, I believe it was the 25th of June, and they both did their passports on the same day. And that passport in particular, Jim and Gary, I don't think of anybody who has ever seen it before. I think tonight we're gonna show it for the first time. And it's not, huh?
Another JFK exclusive.
Yeah, because everybody talks about Lee's passport from when he went to the Soviet Union and won the 1959, all right? But nobody talks about passport D092526, which is the one that that was given to Lee when he renewed it in June of 1963. And what he did or what did not do with that passport is what really intrigues me, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I'm going to go right here real quick and talk about this guy, Carlos Gutierrez Menoyo.
Yeah, Rambo.
Yeah,
Rambo. And I promise you that half of the movies are based upon this guy.
They should make a movie about this guy. You know, when you go and fight, you know, in Africa, you know, in the African theater, World War II, and after, you know, you're only 15, 16 years old, you leave Spain after Franco, you know, the fascists take over the country, and you decide to go to France, and all of a sudden World War II explodes, you know, and you find yourself fighting with Leclerc in Africa, you know, against Rommel and, you know, that kind of thing, Jim. You know, we're talking about, hey, you know, a teenager, you know, and maybe we need to, you know, talk about this guy a little bit, you know, and how he could have affected history had he done what he tried to do on that 13th day of March, 1967, where, you know, a group of student freedom fighters, you know, tried to take out Fulgencio Batista, you know, on that attack on the presidential palace. And that's where Carlos Menoyo comes in, you know, and, you know, let's talk about this guy.
Throw that thing up. You on screen share?
Yeah, let me screen share real quick. I thought I had already done it, but here you go.
Yeah, whenever you see a movie and they're coming through at the machine guns, trying to get him, this is
yeah. The Gutierrez Menoyo, you know, very important family, you know, in the fight against Castro. Eloy, by the way, the younger brother, fought against Batista from the Escambray Mountains, you know, the SNFE, Segundo Frente del Escambray, which was Nacional, and they were fighting against Batista, but from a position closer to Havana, where Fidel Castro, once he settled in the Sierra Maestra, was west of of Eloy, okay, and his group of guerrillas fighting from the Escambray Mountains, which were only a couple of hours away from Havana, Jim and Gary. So when Castro finally arrived in Havana after, at the beginning of 1959 there, Eloy and William Morgan, the American freedom fighter who went up to fight with him, they had been waiting for Castro for a week and Che Guevara, so the story of Carlos Gutierrez, is incredible. So let's just talk about this guy for maybe 20 minutes, and then we'll move on to the passport thing.
Yeah, go ahead and read it for us, Jim.
Sure. Some historical figures tend to be forgotten, if not ignored altogether, as the nonstop river of time and history flows on. Others take on a larger than life aura because of their bravery and willingness to put their ideology above their own lives. Such is the case of one, Carlos Gutierrez Menoyo. Of course, his younger brother Elroy obtained fame and notoriety in the late 1950s and early 60s that Carlos never did. However, it was Carlos who paved the way for Eloy to take the baton and run with it in their quest to liberate Cuba from the clutches of, first, a nasty dictatorship, and second, the communist state that came after the successful revolution that got rid of the dictatorship. Unfortunately, neither of them was successful, and only the accurate portrayal of their struggles remains as consolation. The Eloy story is highly convoluted, where at times documents contradict each other. That is not surprising because after he broke with Castro in 1960, the state-controlled media continuously painted him in a negative light.
And let me just say real quick here, Jim, that the reason that happened in 1960 is when Eloy was very smart and perceptive in what was going on. And when he saw people like Che Guevara, who were Marxists, and communists, and how the revolution was starting to some people, to be remunerated, when they shouldn't have been, and that kind of thing. And so the first thing that Eloy said, look, if there's any communist element here, I want to know about it, and I'm not going to be a part of it. And that's exactly, and he stuck to that, until he died, Eloy. And we're talking about Eloy, who was Carlos's younger brother. All right. And he's the one that fought with, in the Escambray to take out Batista at the end. And they waited for Castro for a whole week in Havana before. And that's how the whole thing was consummated. So let's go.
You mean they waited for Castro to actually make the entry into Havana to secure the city? Yeah,
because they were only a couple of hours away in the Escambray, which is a little southeast of Havana. And I wish, I should have put up a map here to show, but Fidel was in the Sierra Maestra, which was Oriente, east of Havana. That's why it took him a whole week to get there. After Eloy and his people had already been there for a whole week.
Yeah, one of the problems.
Would it be the case that Eloy then could have dumped Batista, but they waited for Castro because he was to be the leader of the new state?
Exactly, and which Fidel, was in the right place at the right time, because all of and this is part of what we're going to talk about here tonight, how he was the last man standing, so, and because the people that were involved in the assault in the palace in 1957 that we're going to talk about, which included Carlos Menoyo, those were the people that would have taken Cuba, into, the 1960s, and then we'll talk about real quickly here, Echeverria, who was the leader of the student movement in the University of Havana. And he was also part of this whole thing that we're going to talk about here. Where they tried to assassinate Batista in his presidential palace.
Yeah, the problem with overthrowing governments is the guy that comes behind them is not exactly what you had in mind. Kind of like new boss, the same as the old boss.
And that's a lot of what happened with Eloy later on, because when they tried to say, hey, we got other people here, we'll invade, 1961. But most of the people that were going to come would have been Batista cronies, so it would have been the whole thing all over again. And that's what Eloy, did not want. He wanted, democracy. He wanted elections and that kind of thing. So Carlos is his older brother.
The Carlos side of the battle, on the other hand, would certainly provoke special interest because of his international exposure in Spain and the European World War II theaters of war. Who was this guy who almost single-handedly changed Cuba and world history? Had he taken out Fulgencio Batista that fateful afternoon of 13 March 1957?
That's right.
So he actually had that opportunity.
Yeah. Go ahead and scroll, Ryder.
Yeah, right here. In a rare self-published booklet titled El Radarista, a short story by Eloy while he was in prison. Actually, he spent, I believe, 25 years in prison. And his daughter, Elena Patricia, who was my friend, included in this epilogue an essay by an individual using the pseudonym Pedro Páramo. Like, Pedro Páramo is one of the most important novels of Latin America, by Juan Rulfo in 1955. A surrealist type of novel, which, just blows my mind. I'm not going to go into that at this moment, but very, very famous, top of the line. And so this guy with a pseudonym, Pedro Páramo, he writes, this little story about Carlos Gutierrez and the whole family, and how they had been fighting against Franco's fascism in Spain, and where the family, the patriarch, Dr. Carlos Gutierrez Zabaleta, was drafted as a doctor into the Republican Army, and to firstborn Jose Antonio, who died in battle in October 1937. That was the, the oldest. To their history in Cuba, beginning with Carlos Gutierrez Menoyo, who became the military leader in Havana of the DRE, the Directorio Revolucionario Estudiantil, and who died in the attempted assault on Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista's presidential palace. And then all the way to Eloy, as we go down, the family tree, who founded the SNFE, Segundo Frente Nacional del Escambray, which we've been talking about, where the mountain ridge, right south of Havana, and later take Carlos's place in an effort to liberate Cuba from the U.S., from the U.S.-supported Batista dictatorship. So this is all, from an article, and this is a very rare photo that I found, and I found this in Cuban blogs from Cuba, that you can go and visit, and there's a lot of information coming out now. Before, I believe, when there were restrictions on the internet, Jim, and maybe you can chime in here on that, over the years, if that has been improving, or because before I remember that, it was forbidden, but it seems today that there are certain blogs, and a lot of these talk about, Carlos Gutierrez Menoyo and, the assault on the presidential palace, when they tried to take out Batista there, So, as you know, the internet is, supposed to be completely wide and open, but
there was a golden age from around 1980 to 95 when actually it was very open, and you really could find almost anything that anyone had ever published or put up. It was a wonderful period, but
yeah,
too many were learning too many truths about the corruption of their own government for them to be able to sustain freedom of speech and freedom of the
everything was going fine until Jim wrote this book called Sandy Hook.
All right, so you can pick it up there.
It should be noted that Carlos would join the French resistance under General Philippe Leclerc in France at 16 during World War II.
Yeah.
He anticipated campaigns in Africa versus Rommel, who, along with Patton, were probably the two greatest tank commanders in world history. He fought in Italy and later landed at Normandy, continuing all the way to Germany. He rode triumphantly into Paris upon its liberation and was a seasoned resistance veteran by the time Batista took over in 1952, having also participated along with Fidel Castro and Rolando Masferrer in the Cayo Confess attempt to invade the Dominican Republic and overthrow Rafael Leonidas Trujillo in 1947.
A very quite a forgotten event in history there in 1947, where Cuba, Trujillo, of course, notorious as he was, and another dictatorship, in the Caribbean, and where this would, this group of freedom fighters would try to go and, take out Trujillo in 1947. And Carlos was right in the middle of all this. And if you look at the map, Cayo Confites was right on the north edge there of Cuba. And from there, they would have passage to the Dominican Republic. And then after that, you're going to find out that this whole thing got turned out completely around when Trujillo tried to invade and take out Fidel Castro in 1960 in the Trinidad affair. So this is like a back and forth thing going on here. Okay, so anyway, we'll talk about, we'll go and go ahead to hear on what
here's Carlos, who joined the French resistance during World War II. A photo of him entering the liberated Paris aboard a Leclerc division tank. He was a formidable warrior.
Oh yeah. Okay, I see. That is the presidential palace, Batista's. All right, and this is what happened on 13th of March, 1957, and this whole operation, which was led by mostly two people, like I said, Jose Antonio Echeverria, the guy who was the leader of the students in Havana, and Carlos Gutierrez Menoyo, who was in charge of the military aspect of the operation. So.
The only first-hand accounts of the assault on the presidential palace above on 13 March 1957 can be found online in Cuban news blogs. They are important narratives that define the character and courage of Carlos Gutierrez Menoyo, elevating him to a sort of paladin for liberty and justice, have gone will travel.
Yeah, that's right.
It's clear from these passages he had a backup team to assist. Carlos and his men had the outcome might have been entirely different, and Fidel Castro ruse would have only been an afterthought in Cuban history. Here are some of the most vivid accounts.
Why? Because had they taken out Batista, Fidel Castro would have stayed in Mexico. He would have never had to go in the ground mile with 80-something other guerrillas and landed in all the way in Santiago de Cuba, and then finally be the protagonist of the entire revolution here. It would have never happened, Jim.
Yeah, he could have been writing the history books.
That's what exactly. Okay, so here's the translation right down here, and this is heavy duty stuff right here.
Yeah, I don't see the translation yet.
Right here, around 35 men led by Faure Chamon and Carlos Gutierrez Menoyo left a safe house.
Scroll up a little bit, I think.
Huh?
I think you got to scroll up.
I'm at the top already.
No, he's reading this. Oh, here it is. Around 35 men, led by Faure Chamon and Carlos Gutierrez Menoyo, left a safe house on 21st and 24th Streets in El Vedado in a closed truck together with two cars toward the palace. Upon arrival, Gutierrez Menoyo got out of the car with his machine gun, struck down the posted guards, and entered the building along with Luis Almeida,
Pepe Castellanos, and Luis Goicoechea.
Yeah, they appreciate your getting the names right.
And Jose Guaguemar.
Most of whom fell in action in a few minutes. They were already in the office of the dictator, Fulgencio Batista, who escaped through a secret door of the building to the roof. from where the garrison made easy targets of the attackers, and Carlos Gutierrez and several of his companions were killed. Too bad.
It gets better. These are, I've collected different versions from different people, and very interesting. Go ahead.
At the palace, Carlos, Pepe, and so arrived at the Hall of Mirrors. We got to the door of the bored dictator's office, the latter testified. We heard excited voices inside. Gutierrez shouted, "Come out with your hands up." The answer was a shot that shattered the glass door. Carlos threw 4 grenades through the hole in the broken glass. The first 3, however, did not explode. On the 4th,
3 out.
that would be pretty troubling. An explosion on the 4th, an explosion would hurt instantly. We went through the door firing our weapons. 2 dead men lay on the floor. The office was empty. We tried to find a secret passageway that we had been told linked Batista's office to his rooms on the 3rd floor. Impossible to achieve.
According to Goicoechea.
And those are a couple of dead bodies there at the top, right?
No, those are sacks.
Yeah, okay, yeah, sandbag. According to Gutierrez, we left the office and headed toward a spiral staircase to try to reach the 3rd floor. Useless. From the roof of the upper floor, they were firing at us mercilessly. We were already short of ammunition. Carlos' machine gun had jammed. Castellanos had empty magazines. The support group hadn't appeared anywhere. They were left
they were, yeah, and that's the key to the whole, to the failure of the operation, that and at the end, just either mention it either because of cowardice or because of logistics, we don't know. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Come Sartorio.
We gotta flip it more, Gary.
Okay.
Larry.
Okay. These are actual pictures of the presidential palace and the area where this firefight occurred, Jim. And yeah. And
Sartorio, upon entering the palace, had taken to the left wing of the building. I advanced to the bottom, shooting. Always shooting. The firefighting is intense. I changed the magazine, kept shooting. Thereupon, I see they wound Mario
Casañas.
Yeah, I see him faint and pull him toward me. It's Mario's blood. Carlos Gutierrez did not lose his optimism, however. Guys, we're already on the 3rd floor. Let's go, he shouted.
Machadito
pointed out to him the need to bring in their comrades who were fighting from the ground floor as reinforcements. Carlos agreed, went back to look for them. Accompanied by Castellanos, they headed down the hall toward the stairs, unaware they were exposing themselves to the fire on the 3rd floor. They both fell dead.
That's right.
Wow, not good, not good.
No. Well, like I said, unfortunately, when examining the historical record, most, if not all, the credit goes to Jose Antonio Echeverria, leader, like I said, of the student movement at the University of Havana, there, DRE, which later on, branched to Miami and New Orleans and all that, and Bringuer, whatever. Whose mission was
bullet holes, man.
Right, yeah. Whose mission and his mission was to go and take over the radio station Radio Reloj and coordinate his message with the attack on the palace. So they were going to go, hey, we just took out Batista, and democracy, and his squad was successful in this part of the mission. And the transmission announcing the coup did make it onto the airwaves before being cut off.
So they broadcast that the coup had taken place, and everything was under control, and our boys are laying dead.
Not knowing what had actually happened at the palace. Exactly.
What really happens is, I think it was cowardice that those people didn't show up. I mean, look.
And that's where the whole thing about the mystique of Carlos comes in, because when this happened, he was already in his 30s. He wasn't a little spring chicken or anything like that. Remember that he'd had a lot of experience, in World War II and everything, and that's why he was put into the position of being what I would call, the tip of the spear of the operation. So, if you want to go here, the truth of the matter is that even though Echeverria did risk everything and was felled by Batista. It was Carlos who was the tip of the spear, like I just mentioned, of the operation, who arrived at the presidential palace with guns blazing. Remember, he took out the guards, on the first floor there, and was in Batista's office within minutes. A stairway, and this is one of the things that might be still like a legend or something, because some versions say that Batista escaped through a secret stairway and passageway, and he got away and everything. However, people in the know who knew, how everything was arranged there in the presidential palace said, no, that was just a regular stairway that, was used regularly, after functions or whatever there, in his office, and that it had absolutely nothing, to do where that he would use that, like Batman,
Yeah, like the bookcase spinning around.
Yeah. So anyway, and like I said, a backup support squad, which never showed up, caused by either logistical failure or, perhaps even cowardice, actually sealed Carlos's fate that day. And he is actually, in Cuba, he is considered, a legend and everything. And they actually have named buildings and sports complexes after him, and that kind of thing.
That's a terrific story, Larry. I love it.
Yeah, it's Rambo, before Rambo even existed,
Yeah, I feel like I've been watching Netflix.
Let me get
You
here.
want to switch gears now to Oswald's passport, right?
Yeah. Is it here or is it here?
Yeah, that was an exciting story. I mean, guns blazing,
Right?
running down the palace,
Actually,
Batista
fascinating.
going down the stairs.
Batista had to know his days were numbered.
Yeah. And
Look.
Jim Garrison is the one that said it. He says, in a big operation, things go wrong, just like not killing Lee at the movie theater. And things certainly went wrong here.
Which is
Especially
what
when
should
you're,
have
down
happened, huh?
when you're down at the radio station saying you just, accomplished a successful coup.
All right.
Come to find out, they're coming to get you.
For real, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, this is good stuff coming up here. Hold on, let me. Are we still online?
You on?
Yep,
Need
sure.
it on his screen share.
All right.
There we go.
So we have, from the beginning, there was one passport, right? And this is the one that Lee used to go, to the Soviet Union and whatever. You guys know anything about this, in 1959?
I want to hear it, Larry. It's good.
Yeah, because we all know that Lee renewed his passport in June of 1963, months before the assassination, months before Mexico City. Excuse me. And some of the accepted information and about the whole Mexico City thing and Lee, how he got to Mexico, with a visa that he supposedly took out in New Orleans. All right. And then from there, he went and took a bus, right, and went to Mexico City and registered in a hotel, in a sleazy bag motel or whatever. Then did his whole thing, that they've told us that he did at the Cuban embassy, and also the Soviet thing, which has been, the accepted version. Okay? But what about the passport that he renewed on June 25th in New Orleans, before the sojourn, out to Mexico, supposedly Mexico City? And what were the documents that were used here? And before even getting into any of this, Sylvia Marr, she said, not valid for travel to Cuba. not valid for travel to Cuba. That is so key here. Excuse me, because if this was the norm at the time, then
I mean,
how can you?
that's where he wanted to go. So how the hell could he go there if it wasn't valid for travel to Cuba?
Exactly. How in the hell are you gonna, get this whole thing?
Slam dunk, slam dunk.
And we'll look at the actual visa tourist card, and this is the actual passport application of the 25th here, and some of the information here.
I'm dying to ask a question, Larry. I have to ask a question. Have you shown this to Judy?
No. Actually, no. It's and then you're gonna find out here who. This is so crazy. Who is the guy who takes possession of the passport and the whole file on the weekend of November the 22nd, 1963? Our old friend, what does it say here? Warren C. DeBrew. Hello.
Wow, Larry, man, there's a few shows that people can go back. I'll leave them in the link, but there's some shows that really precede this.
Let me tell you something about this one, because this one, I don't know why people don't look at this. This is the we can this whole thing. It's 9 pages, but has anybody ever looked at this in detail here the way that you should?
Not to my knowledge, Larry. You're doing blazing trail research here.
Got guns blazing.
Yeah, guns blazing. Huh?
In the JFK community.
That's why I call it theater of the absurd.
Wow. So now Debris, for people that don't know, just give us a little quick about Debris. He had an office. He was an FBI agent right across the street from a bar where everyone was hanging out. He was obviously Oswald's handler, and he had a list of people that he his informants. And in fact, I forgot the guy's name, but he's one of the first people I ever saw come out and say, yes, I was an FBI informant. What was his name?
Orestes.
Oh yeah.
Orestes, the Cuban guy.
So man, this is solved, Larry. I mean, my God.
Well, the thing about this is that Lee takes out a brand new, spanking new passport June the 25th. But then he decides to supposedly go to Mexico, and he doesn't use the passport as the main document for the tourist card. He supposedly uses his birth certificate, all right, which obviously does not have a picture, of course. Obviously, you're born, you're a baby, how you're going to put that on there, right? And that is the mode of identification
how could they do that, Larry? That's just absurd. You'd have no idea whether this birth certificate had anything to do with the man standing in front of you. I mean, this is a farce.
That's why it's called theater of the absurd. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Go back over the passport. I'm interested in that, Larry.
Of course, and something. Go ahead and do a search anywhere online. You're not going to find it. Okay, I found it in a specific place where it was. Look, see the fingers here holding the passport on the left.
Yeah.
Okay. This was done at the Dallas Police Department the weekend of the assassination, when the passport was found not in Ruth Payne's garage.
Don't tell me it was outside a building that was just been hit by a plane.
No. It was found over on North Beckley. All right.
What the hell?
It was found at North Beckley. Tent where you guys
The rooming house.
and I went and did, you know, we did shows and we did videos and everything in front of the rooming house, remember?
Yeah. I don't think it's there anymore though.
14. Anyway, this is the passport. And as you can see, Jim and Gary, Cuba. What does it say here?
Says not to be.
Well, it says if you go to Cuba, you can be prosecuted. It's not why. Yeah.
I mean, this whole house of cards, Jim and Gary, just on this, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I love when government documents contradict the government's official account. I love it.
You can't. It doesn't get any better than this here, you know.
That's about as good as it gets. Yes, I agree. I mean, how ridiculous. How ridiculous.
So let me, because Sylvia, you know, she had the way that she presented it, you know, I thought it was, you know, the best, you know. So she would say, I'll pick it up right here. Such permission is normally withheld from Americans with passports not valid for travel to Cuba, Jim and Gary. That is why Americans who defied the ban and visited Cuba had to go by way of Prague or other Eastern European capitals. Travel to Cuba via Europe was far beyond Lee's known means, obviously, you know, right? He was scarcely unaware of that. Since
who knows where he actually was physically at this moment in time.
And that you mentioned that, that's exactly, if he was overseas on that passport that we just showed, it would have shown entry and exit visas, correct? So
it would normally, yes.
So maybe he could have been in China, you know,
for all we know.
Exactly, he could have been in Minsk, you know, or whatever. But
or he could have been in Omaha enjoying a good American steak.
Yeah. Yeah. So we all know about Orestes, who Gary, you know, inquired, you know, a little while ago. And recall that he renewed his passport on exactly the same day that Lee did, on 24 June 1963.
Pena?
And yeah, Pena. And then, so that's why the FBI thought, hey, you know, this thing might be connected here, you know, Hoover and Tolson and, and all those smart Alex. So, you know, then Orestes' passport is printed and it comes out in the Warren Commission document 1307, and it's like 12 or 13 pages long, and all it is on Orestes' passport, the same one that he renewed on the same day with Lee. However, we do not have the same treatment of Lee's passport as Orestes had. All right. So why would that be? Right here. And we just talked about this here. And at this time, I had only been able to zoom in and find Orestes. Then later on, you know, I found Lee's actual passport, the one that was recovered at his rooming house at 1026 North Beckley, not at Ruth Payne's house. Okay. Now, why was that found at North Beckley? You know, that I think that opens up a whole new can of worms here. But anyway, if this were the case, indeed, the entire House of Cards of Mexico City, Cuban and Soviet embassy visits would have been a colossal ruse that has never been challenged before, based on a simple consideration of State Department guidelines during this volatile period. It would also explain why not a single monthly Lee envoy. Remember when we talked about how many shows we did about Lee envoy, which was the eavesdropping, the wiretapping operation there on the Soviet and the Cuban installations there, where there wasn't a single report there that said, hey, you know, this crazy ass wants to, you know, go to Cuba and he wants to use his passport that says what? Hello?
Invalid.
Right? It didn't
Fascinating.
happen.
Yeah.
It didn't happen. Okay,
Yes.
excuse me.
And of course, all the government officials involved in framing him on the Warren staff knew all this to be the fact. I mean,
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I have documents there that say, hey, we know all about this shit, you know? We know that you can't go to Cuba on a US passport. Hello? So why this whole shenanigan shit, you know, in Mexico City? You know, it doesn't, obviously, you know. So
yes. This is good stuff, Larry. Good stuff.
So the reader needs to know that the CIA cast a wide net, precisely trying to plug the movement of subversives from Mexico to Cuba, as seen in a report titled The Movement of Subversives. And I have that document where it laid out exactly the strategy. Mexico, to date, has taken 2 significant steps to control travel to Cuba. Hello. And if he finds somebody like Lee Oswald, we're going to report on that right away, Jim.
Larry, it is a joke. Theater of the absurd indeed.
It has instituted close surveillance of other travelers and the photographing of all persons arriving from or departing Cuba, and has given tacit approval to suspension of service of Compañía Mexicana de Aviación. All right.
So the Warren Commission only published the application, but not the actual passport, because it would have blown the whole story wide apart.
And you know something? The concept of DeBrew taking possession of that file and that passport on 26 November, Jim, just completely confirms this whole thing that we've been talking about DeBrew here now for months and months and a year now. You know how involved, how closely he was involved in the sheep dipping of not only Lee Oswald, but handling him, going to Dallas before the assassination with him. All right, as was reported by Orestes Peña. I believe Orestes 100%. All right, when he said Lee went to Dallas with, DeBrew went with Lee to Dallas before the assassination. All right, he wasn't bullshitting. All right, he was telling the truth. And that whole thing just brings the FBI into very close proximity to the whole operation here of taking out JFK. So what about Lee's passport, which was renewed with remarkable expediency the same day as Peña's at the same passport office in New Orleans? Warren Commission 781 and the HSCA volume, page 343, that's where they are published. And you only see the application.
The monstrous lies the government has sold to the American people is just disgusting beyond belief.
Yeah, so we have that. We now know that the D092526 right here, that's the number of the passport, okay, and exactly the same limitation as Peña's. All right, so going a little bit deeper into the actual application, we got time for this, Gary?
Yeah, we got about 20 minutes to go.
Okay, and this is something, and I have to give John Armstrong 100% credit on this, because he's the one that did the investigation on the actual application of the passport. Okay, and this gets really good. Okay, now first of all, these are the countries that were that Lee supposedly wrote in the application, the countries that he was going to visit: England, France, Germany, Holland, USSR, Finland, Italy, Poland. Okay. Lillian Moret, his aunt, of course, his closest kin. And here.
So you got Dan Rather falsely reporting that it included Cuba when it did not.
Yeah, that was the documentary that we presented it only. And yes, Dan Rather did erroneously report that Lee's passport application intended to travel to Cuba, and obviously it did not. Okay, now here is the 2-page document, and what I was telling you guys here, John Armstrong astutely noted several discrepancies in the names and dates of birth of his parents. And this is something that dovetails with what Ralph has been circulating lately about the name of his mother, and how there are 2 different Marguerites, Jim, even though we know that, how do you say that, that Lee, the two Lee scenario, that Armstrong presents, is a little bit out there, but this portion here that he talks about is right on. And for example, in the application, he goes, Robert Lee Oswald, 1895. Then Margaret Claver, New Orleans, 1907. Okay.
And it's got
And-
Marina's last name misspelled too.
Exactly. And Marina's last name.
How could that
Right.
would be tough for Lee to do if he actually was fluent in Russian and all that. I mean, this
Exactly.
is
And
a little bit
yes.
strange.
Yes, very, very okay. And so the dates of birth, are also wrong. And so what is going on here on this passport application of June the 25th, 1963, okay, where obviously the picture that's Lee, and I would have to say that
Two staples, they don't staple that stuff, I don't think.
yes, they do. They still do. You got to keep, yeah. And Lee H. Oswald, the signature, which I have checked out, and it appears to check out, and so that's where we're at there. Okay, now, finally. Now, again, the entire passport folder is in the hands of the FBI on the night of the assassination. Here it is, November the 22nd. Pursuant to your oral request, I am here attaching here with the passport folder of Lee Oswald. It doesn't say here where they found it. Obviously, I filled that in, for you guys, and then, fortunately, someone at the Dallas Police Department was thoughtful enough to take these photos of the passport book before the FBI took possession of the evidence that night. They have resided.
Thank goodness, Larry, or we wouldn't have a legit photograph of it at all.
And it reminds me also of the Harper fragment. Remember when Harper's his uncle went and took
right, took the photographs at Methodist Hospital.
Otherwise we would have never known, what the Harper fragment was like, and this is exactly what happens here, Now, this exists only at Texas History, UNT.edu. I had never, come across this. I've looked all over for it. This is where it was found, obviously. And as you can see, the fingers here that is holding the passport, This is a camera. Okay, and this was the only way, obviously no photocopier or whatever.
But this is a bona fide United States passport.
And it is the bona fide D092526 passport that was issued to Lee on 25 June 1963. This is the real deal. Right.
Does it have any stamps and so forth?
Hey, thank you. Of course not, because these are the only pages that we have. All right.
That's pretty significant to be missing those stamps.
Absolutely. Because from June to November, he could have been anywhere using that passport, unless it was a some kind of a clandestine operation, like what Judith describes in her book, going to Canada with David Ferry, those kind of operations. I don't know, but this is something that we have never seen before, Jim, and
I'm fascinated, Larry. You're doing such great work, my friend.
This is the first time, I have put out a couple of feelers out there. Nobody has, come up to say, this was published, on such and such a date. Yes, we know about the 1959 passport, with the, he's in the suit tie and whatever, and then the suit coat and whatever. We know about that one. We know about that. That's the one, in fact, that's the one that was surrendered on the day that he renewed this one, Jim. And then later on, it was returned to him in the mail, like always happens. When you renew your passport, what happens? You get the new one, and then a couple of weeks later, you get the old one, right? So anyway, So like I was saying before, the original passport book wasn't found at Ruth Payne's house at Irving, rather at 1026 North Beckley in Oak Cliff, okay, where Lee had rented a room there in the name of O.H. Lee. Now, the passport on the weekend of November the 22nd was received by, of all people, our good friend, New Orleans FBI agent Warren C. DeBrew on 26 November 1963.
That just cannot be a coincidence.
Of course not. And how
They don't talk about him enough.
and just so you know, I hope you guys put this up quick, because this is this is the first time you're going to see this probably here on TV or whatever, on the internet. And here's the receipt that was executed on the 26th of November. It says Warren C. DeBrew. So remember Warren C. DeBrew, we've been,
Can you roll up a little bit and see that? It actually
Sure.
said vaccines. It said the vaccinator.
Oh yeah, well, had a lot of different, they itemized, and they enumerated, all the items here, 439, 440, going on down. And that's the only time that you about Lee Oswald's passport, the one that was, that had been executed in June, that he had only had a couple, again, why? And I think, yeah, here we go. And this is important here, because we're not done. We're not done with you guys.
Yeah.
All right. So go ahead and
This is a 2-page duplicate Mexico tourist card number 24085, taken out in the name of Lee Harvey Oswald in New Orleans on 17 September 1963, which had a 15-day visitation limit. It has been stamped by Mexican authorities entering through Nuevo Laredo on 26 September and exiting Mexico through the same city on 3 October 1963. Case closed, right? Let's see, 26 September. Hardly. Why would Lee not use a passport he just acquired during the summer, 25 June to be specific? And yet, this document says he used his birth certificate as proof of identity, a document that obviously does not include a photograph of the applicant. It's ridiculous, Larry. It's ridiculous.
hello. Has anybody ever stopped to think about these things here, Jim?
Why would anyone use a birth certificate to identify an adult?
Oh, why would anybody in the government accept something like that? I mean, come on,
Right.
give me.
Right.
I mean, this smells like,
Yeah,
manure.
to high heaven. Right.
All right. So anyway, this is the
There's our
photo,
boy.
and
There's
this
our
is-
boy.
That's the one. Now a study of these signatures here, very interesting. Okay, because the L here is completely different. There are elements here that still need to be
Analyze.
analyzed. But the thing about this whole thing here is why you use a tourist card to cross the border, but then when you get to Mexico City, you're going to use the passport.
Yeah,
Which is
either you
exactly
had it
what-
with you when you came in, or you didn't, and you
Right.
didn't, and it doesn't show up later
in
on.
fact,
during-
using the passport at the border would have enhanced the operation. I mean,
Sure.
yeah,
The
not
official story. Yeah.
not this way where you using one document to come in and then the other document to try to get to
Right.
Cuba.
That's incoherent. I agree.
Absolutely. So we'll leave very interesting stuff going on.
Good
Yeah.
stuff, Larry. I love it. I love it. I love it.
I think the passport thing is very important.
It's great. This was a terrific double feature.
Yeah.
Never seen this passport. I had never seen it. When I found it there on the Texas, historical repository, I just jumped.
Good. Good.
That's the one. That's the one that I've been looking for.
Great find, Larry. Great find.
Larry,
Alright.
we can hardly stand 2 grand slams in one game, but we got one. I can take it. All right, fellas, y'all want to call it a show on that one?
I think so.
Wow. Yeah, Larry, rolling rough shot over the JFK community. This is JFK 270. We'll see
People
you-
need to
Larry's
pay
got one
attention.
more thought.
Yeah,
Go
one more.
ahead,
Go ahead, Larry.
No, people need to pay attention to stuff like that.
Indeed. Indeed. Indeed.
All right. We'll see you next week, people, folks.